Hey RV family, keep it high, my name is Jay Moore's Third View Guy, reviewing music for the love of music, and I'm back again to bring you another video. Bit of a different episode of Worst to Best Albums today. I found this Metallica albums tier list, and I thought, you know what? This is a perfect time to do one of the most requested episodes of this series with just my brief thoughts of Metallica's discography. Bit of a preface, a forewarning if you will, that my opinions most likely won't be shared by everyone here, but I would absolutely love to hear where you would rank Metallica's discography for yourself. Maybe your favorites, my least favorite, maybe my least favorites, your favorite, but without further ado, let's get right into it and let's start it off with Kill 'Em All. So I think Kill 'Em All's interesting. It's obviously like a quintessential thrash metal classic, and their first record, the record that really kick-started sort of their invention of this really high-powered, speedy thrash metal style. And while a lot of people attribute them to sort of handcrafting this genre as a whole, that's not the case. If anything, Kill 'Em All was so influenced by Motorhead, and there was so much speed metal influence in particular, because speed metal came before thrash metal, and thrash metal was basically just that offshoot. Kill 'Em All, for its time, and for the heaviness of when it was released, I think it really does stand out as a great thrash metal record, but if you put it side by side with their other purebred thrash records, I think it would rank at the bottom end despite having some good songwriting, because I think everything they did past the point of Kill 'Em All was just more well fleshed out and defined than Kill 'Em All itself. So I would say Kill 'Em All is like a solid B, but like a high B, borderline A is where I would put that. Next up is Hardwired to Self-Destruct. I think this record, while a lot of people felt it was a returning point, I disagree with that. I think people set the bar so low because Metallica has tattered everyone's expectations of what they're able to do and able to accomplish, that people think that the bare minimum, Hardwired to Self-Destruct, which is an incredibly bloated record, is like godsend or something. But if you compare it to other Metallica releases, specifically their 80s and 90s output, Hardwired is, yes, a well-produced outing that returns to their roots somewhat, but as a whole, I think it's a very bloated record that is far too long for its own good, far too long-winded for its own good, and in my opinion, I would say it is like a mid to high C is where I would rank it. Death Magnetic. I don't necessarily hate Death Magnetic as much as some people do, but I acknowledge its flaws, which would definitely be production. If anything, Death Magnetic is better instrumentally than Hardwired to Self-Destruct, but the major issue is how pressed down everything feels. It's so loud, it's so tinny, and for noisiness sake, I think that I like a lot of noise music and I like a lot of noisy metal music, but it just doesn't fit Metallica's criteria, and unfortunately I think it drowns out a lot of what makes their musicianship so good in the first place, and I think it sort of undermines their own songwriting. So if I had to put it, I would probably put it C, around the same level as Hardwired, but maybe above. I will be fixing up the rankings at the end. But next up is the Black Album. The Black Album is overhyped as hell. It has so much radio playability on all fronts. People overhype the shit out of it with merchandise, shirts, CDs, vinyls, for good reason. The Black Album kicks ass. There's a reason that it got millions of people that don't give a shit about metal into the genre. Thank the Black Album for putting metal on the map more than it was ever put on the map from Judas Priest, or Sabbath, or Maiden, or Megadeth, or even other Metallica records. Up until that point, Metallica was a well-known metal band, and some people outside of the metal sphere knew of Metallica. But the Black Album is what made Metallica a household name. The singles are amazing, some of the deep cuts are amazing. As songwriters, the Black Album is just great, and for the artistic value alone and what it was able to do for heavy metal, as well as all of the genres that was associated with it at the time, I would say that the Black Album, for me personally, would be an S. A lower tier S, closer to a high A than a high S, but it is definitely an S in my opinion. It is a fantastic record with so many quotable songs, so much great instrumentation, and if you hate the Black Album solely because it's popular or because it's not a straight through and through thrash metal record, it is kind of shallow, and it is sort of a shallow opinion to have on that front. So next up we have Reload. And what I will do is I'll rank Reload and Load side by side because obviously companion records. Reload is the worst of the two. I don't like the fact that they felt the need to do the Unforgiven Part 2, and I think that was a really weird decision, and the Unforgiven Part 2 is just so much worse. And comparatively speaking with Load, you got singles like King Nothing, and as a whole, Load and Reload are two albums that I think are very lacking, and being around the sort of transition point between some really great Metallica records and some really lackluster Metallica records, I think Load and Reload suffer. And if anything, it's not so much the complete dying of the light so much as the brief flickers where it threatens to go out. There are a lot of weak tracks, a lot of weak moments, but ranking them side by side is wrong because I think Load is better than Reload, even if it's just by a little. I would say that Reload is about a high C and Load is probably a mid to low B. That's about where I'd rank them. Because I think that Reload it has a lot of the same things that Load does, but it also took a lot of the worst patterns of Load and sort of just turned them up without some of the really great single work that Load had, in my opinion. And Justice for All. And Justice for All is the most forgettable and overhyped of their thrash metal releases, in my opinion. I don't even own this record, and I think that One is probably one of the most overhyped Metallica tracks, and I get it, it's because the riffs are great, it's because of the tone of the track, but if you want that buzzsaw Metallica sound, they have made so many tracks that have the same sort of formula as One, but just done so much better. And Justice for All also suffers from having, in my opinion, the weakest mix of sort of the Kill 'Em All to the Black Album era, I would say. And Justice for All also suffers from sort of the compressed mix. The bass is just really hard to decipher. There are a lot of sort of dry moments where the energy and the intensity will be there, but the production won't be backing it, so it won't have the same impact as it could if it had a really good mix behind it. For me personally, and Justice for All would probably be at a low B. I would say that's where I'd rank it, as being the weakest of Metallica's, main, that era. Master of Puppets. Whew. So, Master of Puppets is obviously a classic record. How do you not love it? Although, I think that sort of the recognition, the legacy that it's had, has boosted up the hype past sometimes what it should be. There are some of Metallica's greatest moments on Master of Puppets, and it's not hard to understand why people love this record so much and why it's such a standout. The riff writing, the construction, it really was Metallica taking everything up until this point and making it so much more mature as songwriters. They still had the very young, exuberant energy of their initial releases, and they still had that thrash metal edge to them, but everything just felt more mature, everything felt more turned up, and everything was just really well constructed. And Master of Puppets is probably the record that I would suggest to people if they wanted to get into this era of Metallica. I would probably tell them to check out the Black Album first, especially if they're not usually a metal fan, because while Master of Puppets is a very accessible record and a digestible record for both mainstream and underground metal listeners, and just mainstream fans of pop, rap, I think they could get a lot out of the Black Album. While Master of Puppets is accessible, there are some moments that could be too heavy for someone that's not really used to that type of music, especially considering that it has some of Metallica's heaviest instrumentals up until this point. With that being said, I would say Master of Puppets is like a very high A, borderline S record. I think that it's right there on the cusp, and when I fix up the rankings at the end, I might end up moving it to S depending on the field and all that. So, Ride the Lightning. This is my personal favorite Metallica record. I don't know if I've openly said that before. I feel like I have mentioned that before. Ride the Lightning, I think, is when Metallica was at just their strongest point of their strongest songwriting capabilities, and it was everything of Kill 'Em All. It was all of the energy, it was all of the production, but it just felt so amazing. Fade to Black, Creeping Death, For Whom the Bell Tolls, so many great singles. Like For Whom the Bell Tolls, probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite, Metallica tracks. Has some of their most recognizable riffs, some of their best songwriting when it comes to riff writing. Their solos were at the top of their game. They really did still feel accessible, sort of like they did on Master of Puppets, like I said a second ago, but it was so heavy, it was so frantic, but it had this controlled, measured nature to it. It had a good production to it. Everything was audible. James Hetfield was a madman on the vocals. And I think this being the midsection between their first record, where they were just wearing their influences on their sleeve, they had so much energy, and then And Justice for All, and of course Master of Puppets, where they were more mature, especially Master of Puppets, I think this took every element of that era and just made it amazing. So for me personally, I would rank Ride the Lightning very high. I think it would be firmly in S. And then we have Saint Anger. Saint Anger gets a lot of hate, and I totally get that. For me, I don't think Saint Anger is nearly as bad as a lot of people make it out to be. Is it long-winded? Does it have rudimentary songwriting? Is the production kind of crap? Yeah. But I give you a task, a quest, if you will. Go back to Saint Anger and listen to it, and then listen to, say, Death Magnetic, or Hardwired to Self-Destruct, or even Load and Reload. And you'll sort of get that Saint Anger gets a lot of wrong hate. Saint Anger isn't that good of a record. I'm not going to be like the staunch defender of it or anything. It is very weak. But I think it is middle of the road, and besides all of the statements that everyone already knows, I would rank it at a B. So now's the fun part. We have all of them on the list. So where does each one individually rank, and how would this go? So for the C's, I think that I'm pretty okay with all of these being here. If I had to put one at a D, like if I had to rank one at the bottom, it would probably be, I would say, I'm going to be completely honest with you, and this might be kind of controversial, I would probably put Reload at the bottom. And then following that in the high C's, the low C's, I would say Hardwired, see, that's hard because I'm not a big fan of either of those. I think that Death Magnetic is slightly better than Hardwired, and that's because even though the production is shit, I cannot get through Hardwired without feeling like it's the most corny and overblown, just overproduced thing that drags on so long. So that's where I would rank that. Now on to the B's. This is weird. Okay, Saint Anger firmly at the bottom. Out of these, I think that Saint Anger is at the bottom end. I think that And Justice for All is better than Load. And Kill 'Em All, I think, is firmly in the middle. I think I'm fine with Kill 'Em All sort of leading the B's. Master of Puppets being an A, now that's an interesting one. I am so on the fringe of it being S, but I think that some of the overhyped material, some of the deep cuts, sort of prevent it from being S. And even if it was S, I think it'd be right at the bottom of S, behind the other two. And Master of Puppets, nothing but love for it. It is definitely like a really, really high A, but I'm happy with that ranking. And then as for the S's, I would put the Black Album at the bottom end, and then Ride the Lightning at the front. So I guess if this is my worst to best, which this is my opinion, I would say from worst to best would be Reload, Hardwired to Self-Destruct, Death Magnetic, Saint Anger, Load, and Justice for All, Kill 'Em All, Master of Puppets, The Black Album, and Ride the Lightning. Now, obviously, you guys can disagree with that, and if you do, that's perfectly okay. I definitely want to hear your opinion, your album rankings for Metallica, because I think this is a band where a lot of people have a lot of controversial opinions, hot takes, and I think that's the sign of a great discography, is that it is difficult for people to decide. It is difficult for people to really make a consensus on what's good, what's bad. It's all open to interpretation, and that's what a great band does. And obviously, I love Metallica, nothing but love, and I can't wait to hear what your guys' rankings of Metallica is. And I cannot wait to hear your Metallica rankings, and obviously your thoughts of... And obviously I cannot wait to hear your rankings of Metallica. And obviously I can't wait to hear your rankings of Metallica. And obviously I cannot wait to hear your rankings of Metallica and your thoughts of mine. Be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to join the review family today, and smash that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads. You know who it is, my name is Jay Morris, the Review Guy, and I'm signing off saying farewell.